Hi, I'm Dale Jackson with Jackson Heating and Air. Today we're at the beautiful Joey's greenhouse where it's a great project we've been working on for the last year, and today we want to utilize it and all of the Trane products to showcase them and to get in a little bit more detail and show you some of the benefits that Trane has built into all of their quality products. Let's first dig into the new Hyperion air handler. It is a brand new air handler designed and built exclusively by Trane, and we're going to show you some of these awesome benefits. As we break into the system here, you'll see it's extremely easy to take off our doors, and then we're going to dig a little deeper. As you can see here, we are dealing with a all aluminum coil. All aluminum coils were very popular about 15 to 20 years ago, but there were some problems with the connections in there. Trane quit making them for a few years, but now they've brought it back, and it is an amazing and reliable coil. Virtually unheard of to have a leak on an all aluminum coil. But let's get a little bit deeper into this one specifically. One thing that Trane has upgraded, and they're the first of its kind, is the electronic expansion valve. In the heating and air world, the expansion valve is one of the things that gives us the most trouble. But what's unique about this one being that it's an electronic expansion valve, in the past, when one would go bad, what happens is periodically you've got small amounts of trash traveling through the system. And what would happen sometimes is they would get clogged up and all that trash would build up on your expansion valve. There was no repair. It was simply, you called a service tech, they came out, saw that the expansion valve wasn't acting right, and our only option was to replace it. That can be extremely costly because by just replacing the expansion valve, you have to open up your system to the atmosphere. So there's all types of special dryers that they would have to add to your system, not to mention removing all of your refrigerant, and then you had to put new refrigerant in there. It could be very costly. But with the electronic expansion valve, it is designed to prevent that from happening on most occasions. The great thing about the electronic expansion valve is when that trash does happen to come by it, if it were to get clogged up in it, it's already built in and prepared for that. So it has a small screw that it's constantly going in and out to try to meter your refrigerant. That's what it's there for. But when it sees that, hey, something's not right, what happens is it will back all the way out and it'll allow that debris to just keep on going. You've never even known anything happen. You're still cool, and nothing dramatic's happened to your system. If by chance 15, 18 years down the road, if anything does go wrong with the electronic expansion valve, now instead of it being one piece that the only option is to replace it, the actual mechanism is in what they call the head. And it's a simple part that can actually be replaced in about 15 minutes. That's a huge deal when you're a consumer and you're concerned about any future problems down the road. So what Trane has done is they've taken a very common problem, and instead of it being a 3 or 4 hour fix, now they've reduced it down to about a 15 or 20 minute fix most of the time. So that's going to go a long way in helping save the consumers down the road. And plus they've had the built-in safety devices so that hopefully it never is a problem, whereas a more conventional expansion valve, it would be a huge problem. So now as we continue to look at our air handler here, we can see another Trane exclusive. This air handler is a one of a kind, and it's got a lot of new features other than the coil and the expansion valve. But as we look a little closer, we can see the walls. No longer are the walls of the air handler lined with that fiberglass insulation. The number one problem with that is that every bit of insulation has what we call an R value. Well, there's a great deal of moisture in this cabinet, and what happens is over time, the R value on that insulation, it erodes. So that means that on a normal air handler, the outside of the cabinet will begin to sweat. Well, if you're in a crawl space, you're already dealing with a very humid atmosphere, and that can cause a lot of problems. And so now, with this cabinet, we have zero fiberglass exposed. There's no way it can get wet, and it's actually a spray foam insulation that they have injected into the walls. So now, instead of it just being a flimsy piece of metal with fiberglass taped to it, so to speak, now the walls are about 1 inch thick. It's built exactly like your refrigerator in your home. When was the last time you saw your refrigerator sweating? Just doesn't happen. So this entire cabinet, not only is it airtight, but now it is actually watertight. So let's dig a little bit deeper, and I want to show you one more incredible thing. As we take off these doors here on the bottom, you can see. Now, your average consumer may not realize this, but Trane has done something that's completely unique. As we see with our location here, the blower is now below the coil. So instead of the blower trying to pull the air through the coil, now we are blowing the air through the coil. There's a lot of key points in just that simple. It seems simple up front, but in reality it was a very complicated, and Trane spent a lot of time into research and development just in designing this air handler. But one of the key points with having this design is that we no longer have a negative pressure in our air handler. So let's just imagine your unit is up in the attic. A typical attic, sometimes here in Georgia and in Alabama, it's not uncommon for an attic to get up to 135, 140 degrees. So if we continued to have our negative pressure, every single leak in our air handler, it would be drawing that 140 degree air into our air handler, making it more difficult to heat and cool our home. But now we've created a positive pressure. So any small amount of leak that we may have is now pushing out on the air handler instead of bringing in that extreme heat into our living space. One other unique thing about the cabinet itself, and with the placement of the coil and the blower, is now another industry problem that Trane addressed with this air handler is the electronics. Because on a typical air handler, all of our electronics were in extremely moist and damp environment. But now, all of our electronics are basically in conditioned space. Because this is your blower and it's pushing air through, the only moisture would be from here up. So, but now Trane built right into the walls of the air handler, all of the electrical components, they're protected from that moisture. So now your system is going to be much better protected. All the electrical components are in the same atmosphere that you or I are in when we're in your home. So we don't have that extreme case of moisture to worry about. And we all know what moisture can do to electrical components. But once again, Trane is on the cutting edge, and they've thought about it beforehand. And now they've protected your system. This is going to help your system last the longest, retain its efficiency, and overall, it's just an incredible unit.